Every nation that has ever won the World Cup shares a dark secret, one golden hero whose life fell apart. These are the most cursed players from every World Cup winning team. Brazil. We start with the most successful nation in history, and their cursed genius, Garrincha. Born with a curved spine and legs that bent in opposite directions, doctors called him a cripple. Instead, he became perhaps the greatest dribbler who ever lived. The man who, alongside Pelé, won Brazil the World Cup in both 1958 and 1962. And in '62 he practically won it single-handedly. On the pitch, he was pure joy. Off it, his life was a slow tragedy. He battled severe alcoholism, fathered at least 14 children, saved almost none of his money, and was in a car crash that killed his mother-in-law. By the end, broke and forgotten, he was hospitalized again and again. In January 1983, Garrincha died from the effects of alcoholism at just 49, so ravaged it's said the paramedics didn't even recognize him. Germany. In the 1990 World Cup final against Argentina, with the match locked at 0-0, defender Andreas Brehme stepped up in the 85th minute and calmly slotted home a penalty to win his country the entire tournament. It was the biggest moment of his life, but the years after were cruel. Brehme drifted out of football, and his finances collapsed so badly that he ended up close to bankruptcy, reportedly hundreds of thousands in debt. At one point, a former player offered the World Cup winning hero a job cleaning toilets, and the great Franz Beckenbauer had to publicly beg the football world to help him. Then, in February 2024, Andreas Brehme died suddenly of a cardiac arrest at just 63, only weeks after Beckenbauer himself had passed. The man whose single kick made a nation champions, gone with almost no warning. Italy. Paolo Rossi is a national hero, the man who fired Italy to the 1982 World Cup with 6 goals, winning the Golden Boot, the Golden Ball, and the Ballon d'Or, all in a single year. But just 2 years earlier, his career had nearly been destroyed. Rossi was banned from football in the Totonero match-fixing scandal, a ban he always insisted was a complete injustice, swearing he was innocent. He lost 2 years of his prime and was only cleared to play a month before the tournament that made him a legend. He got his redemption. But the story doesn't end happily. In December 2020, Paolo Rossi died of cancer at just 64, passing away within 2 weeks of Diego Maradona, the football world mourning 2 of its greatest icons at once. Argentina. Everyone remembers Maradona, but the cursed hero here is René Haussmann, a winger so gifted they literally called him Argentina's Garrincha. Haussmann grew up in brutal poverty in a Buenos Aires shantytown, right next to an open rubbish dump. In 1978, he helped Argentina win the World Cup on home soil, but that same year, the country's military dictatorship sent bulldozers to flatten his neighborhood, destroying his family home to hide the poverty from foreign visitors. Like Garrincha, Haussmann was haunted by alcoholism his entire life. He once scored a goal he couldn't even remember, because he was drunk during the match. It nearly killed him at 40. He got clean and spent his final years helping kids from the slums he came from. Then, in 2018, tongue cancer took him at 64, France. In the 2018 World Cup final, Paul Pogba scored as France beat Croatia to lift the trophy, the crowning moment for the world's most expensive midfielder. And then his life became a nightmare. In 2022, Pogba revealed he'd been the victim of a terrifying extortion plot, armed men demanding around 13 million euros, a plot allegedly involving his childhood friends, and most shockingly, his own older brother. A knee injury then ruled him out of the 2022 World Cup. And in 2023 he tested positive for a banned substance and was hit with a doping ban. Pogba insisting it came from a contaminated supplement he'd taken unknowingly. His club tore up his contract, and one of the most gifted players of his generation went years without kicking a ball. From the top of the world to losing almost everything. Uruguay. In 1950, in front of nearly 200,000 Brazilians at the Maracanã, Uruguay pulled off the greatest upset in football history, and the man who scored the winning goal was Alcides Guia. He silenced an entire stadium, later joking that only 3 people ever managed to silence the Maracanã: Frank Sinatra, the Pope, and himself. But here's the eerie part. That goal came on the 16th of July, 1950, and it defined his whole life. And decades later, on the 16th of July, 2015, the exact 65th anniversary of that goal, to the very day, Alcides Guia died of a heart attack. It was as if fate had marked the date forever, and finally came back to claim him on it. England. They've won the World Cup only once, in 1966, led by their golden captain Bobby Moore, a man Pelé called the greatest defender he ever faced. Moore lifted the trophy at Wembley as a national. But what many don't realize is that just 2 years before that triumph, he had already survived testicular cancer. And after his playing days, the football establishment strangely turned its back on him. Snubbed for the big jobs, losing money in failed businesses, slipping out of the spotlight. Then cancer returned. In February 1993, Bobby Moore died of bowel cancer at just 51. England's greatest hero, gone far too young, and eerily, several of his 1966 teammates would later be struck down by dementia, as if a shadow hung over the entire team. Spain. And finally, Fernando Torres, El Niño, was one of the most feared strikers on the planet when Spain won their first ever World Cup in 2010. Months later, Chelsea paid a British record £50 million to sign him. And then, football's strangest curse of all took hold. Almost overnight, the goals simply stopped. The lightning striker who used to terrify defenders began missing chances he'd once have buried in his sleep, including an open goal that became infamous. He suffered droughts of more than 20 games. To this day, people still ask the same question: what actually happened to Fernando Torres? A World Cup winner whose golden gift seemed to vanish into thin air, as if it had been cursed right out of him. 8 champions, 8 cursed heroes, from alcoholism and bankruptcy, to eerie coincidences and gifts that mysteriously disappeared. Proof that lifting football's greatest prize sometimes comes with the heaviest price of all.